Hello everybody, welcome to the American Dream. Today we have Darrell Murkison, a very active Lynn citizen, friend of mine. We've been friends for a long time, and we're going to have an interesting discussion about race relations. Dr. King, the CMCC a little bit. Darrell's on the director of the CMCC, and he's the secretary. But before we go there, we have some other interesting guests coming up. We have two editors from the Lynn item, and we have the president of Salem State College, John Keenan, is going to come on, the president of North Shore Community College. In fact, we're going to do 3 shows with them. John Keenan is going to come on first, and then Patricia Gentile is going to come on, and then we're going to have the 2 of them on a combined show. So that should be fun and informative. We also have Mike Sweeney, the head of Veterans Affairs, is coming on, and with some other veterans to talk about veterans benefits and veterans affairs. I haven't talked to the folks at ECHO yet about their job program, but Tony Dunn and I are pretty tight, and I'm sure I can get him on. He's been on the show again to talk about the machinist program. It's a great program. The American Dream is about people moving on up, trying to improve their lives, and we try to get as many guests on this show to talk about ways that people can improve their lives. But not everybody's cut out for college, and Tony Dunn has a great program that we'll talk about. In a new part of the program, Judge Conlon, Bert Conlon, is retiring, and he's going to come on the show from time to time and do a 10-minute segment or so on various people, mostly from Lynn. The first one he's going to do is on Frederick Douglass, and we'll get that set up soon. So, and if you know Bert, he's a serious-minded person. He's also one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. So I hope we can get his humor involved in the show. So, Darrell, as we were discussing earlier, I occasionally talk to kids in schools about government. And I talk about the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. And then I go on to explain that that did not include all men, didn't include black men and men of color. And it did not include women. And women didn't get to be part of the system fully until the 1820s, when Susan B. Anthony led the movement to get women the right to vote. And for black people, it's been a struggle all along. I mean, there was a war fought in 1861 to 1865 that freed slaves, but they didn't get voting rights then, right there. They came along, gradually. And it's still, this very day, a struggle to get the right to vote in some places if you're black. I have a particular interest in both issues, and so I follow it fairly carefully. By the way, a federal judge, I don't know if you saw it, just came out and said North Carolina's system of setting up congressional districts was wrong, plainly wrong, because it was designed to prevent black people from getting a congressman. And so they're going to have to go back to the drawing boards. So that's really a positive development. So there are a lot of positive developments. But I would like to get your take on what's going on today in race relations.
As far as race relations go today, from my point of view, is that I think, like you said, we've made a lot of strides with race relations in the country, but there still exists I would say an undercurrent of racism and suppression of black people and people of color in the country.
It's not necessarily an undercurrent. I mean, for you it's an undercurrent because people won't say things in front of you, but with some white people it's not an undercurrent, it's right out there, I mean, unless they know you would object.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah. But what I mean by that is it's not as overt as it used to be. and open with it. There's not active laws.
Is that because minds have changed?
Well, I think that's because some minds have changed.
Yeah, yeah.
Some minds have
changed. So
changed.
that's where the progress is.
Yeah, I think the progress has been in just the awakeness of people's social consciousness, in just a sense of moral consciousness, let's just say that.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have been shamed into seeing the inequities that exist.
Yeah. I mean, and some of the things you see are amazing, especially what happened in the 60s in Alabama with the fire hoses. I mean, the hangings. I mean, you know,
yeah, there was hundreds of thousands of lynchings going on, started back in
1820s, right?
In the 1820s up to like the, even some people would say even to current days, you might see it.
Some people
they're
would like
suspicious.
To see it.
You know, they still find people lynched in the South, around the country. You still see this, but it's not as frequent as it used to be. Thank God, it's not. But
is that because of law enforcement, or is that because of a change of attitudes? Do you think, or a combination?
I think it's a combination thereof. Probably more so, I would think. I would say it just actually starts with the attitudes of people, more so than anything else, because even with the law wouldn't be able to be changed or enforced to any degree if people didn't have that conscious mindset to change. Some people have to have that mindset to change.
Right.
Of course, you have the law on the books and the enforcement of those laws that give it teeth.
So how do you change? There's only so much legislation that you can do. Do you think there's a need for any legislation right now, state or federal?
I think there's always a need for legislation because, by and large, people do respect the law. You know, the rule of law, if it's instituted and agreed upon by the people. So I think those laws have to be in place. They always have to be. But what we need, I think, more so right now is the enforcement. There's a lot of laws on the books that say you can't do different things to discriminate against people, to practice hate crimes against people, but they have to be enforced. A lot of people report these crimes and there's nothing done about it. So I think that the enforcement is big.
So you're talking about enforcement by the police?
Enforcement by the police,
by the
judicial system.
Okay. You think judges don't enforce the crimes?
What I think
they don't conduct fair trials.
Well,
judges I know are pretty good.
Well, I think there's
pretty good.
There's something called truth in sentencing. All right, in the application of the law as it's presented. I think that, or even just fairness in sentencing. African Americans are twice as likely to be arrested, more than twice as likely to be convicted of a crime than white people, more than twice as likely to go to jail, and they receive higher sentences or longer sentences for similar or same crimes. So there's no justice in terms of fairness in sentencing, just again applying the law.
Do you have facts to back that up?
Absolutely.
Tell me about the disparity in blacks getting higher sentences than whites.
Let me just say this. I'm involved with a group called ECHO.
Right.
You know, Essex County
They've been on the show.
Organization, been talking about that, and we've been working on what they call the Justice Reinvestment Act, and some of these things, we've gotten the documentation for all of these, so that right now it's at the State House. They're working on this to make sure that there's truth in sentencing and fairness in sentencing people. All those facts that I've spoke to, yeah, there's facts to that. Throughout the Commonwealth, the different cities, they have to submit different data when how they arrest people, what their ethnicity is, all these different things, and their own data and figures bear it out.
I'm a Lynn lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
You're a Lynn guy. I know most of the judges that sit in Lynn, especially the ones that sit on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis in Lynn District Court. I can't imagine one of them giving a more severe sentence to a black person than a white person.
I can't speak to it specifically in the city of Lynn,
Okay,
but I just know what these figures are, probably statewide.
okay.
And
I'd
but-
like to see those
but I-
figures sometime, and I'll bring them back on the...
I'll
bring
try to
them-
get them specifically for Lynn.
Yeah, I'd like to see them both.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll mention it in another program,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think that's true. In Lynn, I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's where I spend most of my time.
We'll address that.
Yeah.
I think that we'll let the data speak for itself.
Yeah,
Mm.
okay. So, but the other things you mentioned, what about those? Where are they going? I mean, how would you, you said you would like to see legislation. What legislation would you propose, either state or federal, to make things, to improve things?
New legislation that I would propose, right now I can't think of any new legislation other than, again, just have fairness in sentencing with people in terms of people being convicted of crimes and serving actual time for different things. But in terms of the legislation that's already on the books, again, I would say that if a person is stopped without just cause by a police officer and some crime may be committed by the police officer against a civilian, that police officer should be held just as accountable as anybody else. Because they're sworn to uphold the law.
Yeah.
They're not the law themselves. The law applies to them as well.
Well, let's talk about this a little bit. That's a major fear in America of black people being afraid, especially if they have a young son driving on the highway, that if he's stopped by police, whatever you do, be careful.
Absolutely.
It's a major fear held by black people.
It is not just for...
And it seems like it's justified. I mean, all these people that have been killed in the last few years, it's amazing. And, you know, sometimes a person is guilty of a crime. We did a show a couple of years ago with the sheriff, who was then the police chief, and I thought it was a really good show. And I thought he did a fantastic job. His head was in the game, and he required training of his police department. And I think he's done a good job. And training, it seems, would help across the country. I mean, some of those guys out in Colorado and Alabama, they were nuts.
A lot of different places like that, and I think that I agree with you. I think that now Sheriff Coppinger, who was a former chief, I think did a great job, actually, in trying to eradicate some of these things. And that did come with training, but I think first and foremost, Sheriff Coppinger was very available and willing to listen.
Right.
And
willing to speak out. I mean, what you and I both liked about him was the way he explained the different uses of force. I mean, you don't pull a gun on somebody who's arrested for shoplifting, who's not doing anything wrong, you know, other than the shoplifting. So he had a very good sense of what to do.
Yeah, I think
we should mint them and send them all over the country.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, you know, like I often say that the job for a police officer anywhere is one of the most difficult jobs you might ever encounter. And I think that people need to know, and a lot of them do know, that that's the situation going in. So it's not easy being a police officer.
Oh, no doubt about that. No doubt about that.
That being said, the difficulty of this job, everyone can't do it, and everyone shouldn't be a police officer. So if you have someone who...
hiring and training, that's right.
Hiring, and training,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you have someone going into this situation and they're afraid if they see someone that doesn't look like them, and all of a sudden their first reaction is just to pull their gun and shoot,
Right.
maybe this job is not for you.
No doubt about it.
You know, should he be concerned about his own personal safety and welfare? Absolutely. But should that be your first reaction to something? That's where your training comes in. That's where your temperament comes in, to handle the job as a police officer.
Let's leave police for a minute. What about the day-to-day lives of black people in America?
I think the day-to-day lives of black people are extremely challenging. Extremely challenging. Like right now, people believe that we live in a post-racial society where we have a level playing field on everything, and that's simply not the case for African-American people. And I think the disparities exist economically, they exist educationally, they exist socially. And an example I would give is this. I just saw some data come out maybe a week or two ago talking about our unemployment is at one of the lowest rates it's been. I believe that the national unemployment rate is maybe 4.1, I believe. National unemployment is 4.1, but for African Americans it's 6.8. For white Americans, it's half that, 3.4. You know,
So why?
I would say lack of opportunity. Lack of opportunity and just suppression of people. If you look and just say the city of Lynn and probably the majority of municipalities around the country, we'll just take the city of Lynn because I think we can all can relate to that. If you look at the city of Lynn and you see what the power structure is, you will see what I call systemic or institutional racism. And that's the exclusion of black people being included within the power structure and the natural fabric of the city. In City Hall, if you walk through there in City Hall and you want to pay your taxes, you walk through there, chances are the person you're paying your taxes is going to be a white person. If you go down to pay your parking ticket, you have to pay it to a white person. You go into just about any department in City Hall, you'll be hard-pressed to see maybe one person of color there. If you go into our school system.
Let's stay with City Hall for a minute, then we'll go to schools.
Sure.
Why do you think that's so?
Because I think that everybody wants to have a good, decent job. Everyone wants to be in a position where they have some sort of influence or power. So it's very hard. Power is a hard thing to give up. So in the United States itself...
Oh, you take it.
Say again, please?
Take it.
Just take power?
Yeah.
So you're talking about revolution?
No, I'm not talking about revolution.
Okay.
I'm talking about political revolution.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the power structure in City Hall and the people who hold jobs there,
Mm-hmm.
they all came up one way or another through political ranks, or many of them. I'm not going to say all. So you need to run, I know you have in the past, but African Americans need to run for office to take the power.
Okay, I think that to be included in that power, I would say that would be a step in the right direction.
Oh, I think a big step. Now, in days gone past, the black population in Lynn was about 11%.
Mm-hmm.
But if you combine the black population with the Hispanic population and Asian population, I think it's now about 60%. In fact, we have Buzzy Barton's on the council and Hugh...
So that's 1 out of 11, right?
I'm going to get to 2. Look, it's not my fault. I'm recommending it. I
understand. I just want to make sure, point out the disparity.
Right. But in Hong Net is representing, minorities.
Yes.
And Maria Carrasco's on the school committee, and she resigned. but Tom Satterwhite is on the school committee, and
Michael Satterwhite, yeah.
Michael Satterwhite, excuse
Yes.
me, and a nice guy, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And we have someone else on the school committee. No?
Not of color, no.
No. Okay. So
Maria was there prior to Michael, and prior to that, it only had been one person, that was Vinnie Jarvis.
yeah, back in the '60s. Yeah.
In the history of the city.
I know. But partly it was because of, I mean, you know, as you know, I've been in politics all my life.
Yes.
So I'm an Irish guy, and I ran and I got elected to the House of Representatives and the Senate. And I counted, in part, by the way, I had a lot of friends who helped me from the black community. But I also counted on Irish people to vote for me simply because I was Irish. If a lot of people really understood what I thought, they probably wouldn't have voted for me. But that's the way it works. So if there's only 11% of the population is black, it's hard. And not impossible, as Vinnie Jarvis proved, but it's hard to do. So Buzzy was the beneficiary of an amazing mother. She put up with the same stuff. I served on boards with her. She and I were good friends. I did the eulogy at her funeral. She was a devoted member of the community, and she served on boards all across the city. She was the only one, practically the only woman back in the 60s, 70s. So, in fact, we started a group to train people, minorities, to serve on nonprofit boards of directors. She and I started that back about 20 years ago. We named it after her after she died. And that's been very, very beneficial. Friends of yours, they went on to serve on the board at the Lynn Community Health Center, one of the biggest employers in the city, and they provide vitally needed services. They became presidents and treasurer, secretary. I don't know about treasurer, but
yeah, I think that's a good thing, Jim. Again, that's something a step in the right direction. That I think, again, it seems to me that it's been a select group of people that have been allowed to serve on these boards. And even when you're serving on these boards, it does give you some insight about the particular organizations that you're serving on. But the majority of those board appointments they're just that, but you can't feed your family from this.
It's that's a different.
It's not
but
a job.
It's part of the power structure.
It is part of the power structure, but are these board members actually hiring people?
No, usually the director does that, but they hire the director. When we started this program, there were very few minorities serving on boards. And it was the big need, all of a sudden people were waking up. We're trying to do things for minorities. Maybe we should have some minorities serving on the board, And so, funding sources would say to organizations like Lynn Community Health Center, how many minorities do you have on your board? And some people are reporting, not the health center, but some people are reporting back zero. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to mention the organization. I got asked to be on a board one time. And so it was like, it was out of existence, except they had money to give away, and it was kind of, I said, sure, all right, I'll do it, a couple of meetings a year. And then they must have been asked about minorities, and particularly Hispanics.
Right.
So I was at a meeting, and the guy says, Jim, we need to get some Hispanics on the board. Do you know anybody? And I said, sure, and I rattled off 3 names right away of really good people, right?
Right.
And they were like shocked, like, we don't really mean, that we want it right now, So those things happen. So when I ask you about the day-to-day struggles of people, I'm trying to explain it to our audience, what goes on. I mean, you know.
I would say that, again, the day-to-day struggle of black people is that, again, it will be something that's institutionalized. What I mean by that, Jim, is it goes back many years. Generations, where the power structure has already been laid. It's almost like playing Monopoly. Like you go there, and the board is already laid out, and this person's already owned this, they already own this, they already own this, they already own that. So when you try to get into that, you have to pay every time you land on that spot. You're not part of that structure right there. And that's what black people are faced with. Every major decision that a black person has to make, there's a white person making a decision on their life, whether they're going to get it yes or no.
Well, that's why I say, take it. If it's a political thing, I mean, no one ever said to me, you know, geez, we want you to run for office. You know, I did that on my own. I decided to do it, and I did it. And I worked hard. And that's what creates a seat. If you look at the people who win council and school committee seats and mayoralty seats, they work like hell, and some don't. So I'm saying, and learn the political skills.
Well, let me ask you a question. I think it's very important, actually.
Sure. And we're going to have to wrap this up in 1 minute.
Really quickly. I understand that the importance of having some kind of political position and political power and influence. But how does that translate into economics? Purely because a lot of times you're dealing with people, the problem that prohibits people from rising and doing better is that they simply don't have a job. People that are able to do well in society and do well for their families, the difference is some people have jobs and some people do not. So would these political people be able to say, all right, now that I'm in office, I'm going to find a job for you, I'm going to find a job for you, I'm going to find a job for you. Because I think that's the challenge that someone like Buzzy or Hong Net may have. People come to them saying, now you're in office, can you get me a job? And
we got to wrap this up. The quick answer is yes. That's why I say grab the power, because they can. Why do you think all those people in Lynn City Hall have jobs? Because they knew a politician. So if black people and other minorities are politicians, they can get people jobs. Plus, they're a standard bearer for the community. They say, hey, look at Buzzy. You know, he's a really cool guy. You know. And
so we should expect more from Buzzy and Hong Net to get people jobs. We can send in people to them. They can get them jobs.
I would, yes.
Okay, so Buzzy, Hong, we're going to be sending people to you because you can get them jobs. There's so many people that are economically deprived because they don't have employment. And let me just ask this one question to the audience here. Think about this.
Go ahead.
I'm going to keep talking because just say go into education. Ask yourself this question. I grew up here in the city of Lynn. When I went to school, I had one black teacher my whole academic career in the 5th grade. Ask yourself, how many black teachers did you have growing up in the city of Lynn? Or just flip it for a second. What if you grew up and you never saw a white teacher your whole academic career except for one? How would that play on your self-esteem as a young child growing up and a student in the city of Lynn? That's what most of the young people in the city of Lynn are dealing with. And I've spoken with the superintendent, and the numbers bear it out, that they have to do more.
Take the jobs.
Revolution?
No. We can do this with a political revolution. I'm going to get killed if we don't stop the show.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate everything.
All right, pleasure.
Thank you.